In the dark heart of New York City, hidden among the noise of honking taxis and the neon lights of Broadway, there are stories the city doesn't want to remember. One of them is the tale of the man the newspapers once called the Butcher of Brooklyn. It began in the late 1970s when people started disappearing from the streets of Brooklyn late at night. At first, no one paid much attention. New York was violent, then crime was high. The city was struggling and missing people were common. But this was different. On October 29, 1976, witnesses spoke of a tall man with piercing blue eyes, always dressed in a long, dark coat, who was seen wandering the streets after midnight. They said he carried a large black leather bag, large enough to hide terrible secrets. People who saw him too closely never seemed to come back. It was a cold November night when Jennifer Levin, a 19-year-old co-ed, left a bar in Manhattan with a date. Around las 3 de la mañana, she was spotted hailing a cab near the corner of 84th Street and 2nd Avenue. Her date, however, told police he had taken the train home hours earlier. Jennifer vanished without a trace. Across the city in Brooklyn, someone reported seeing a man matching the description of the stranger, carrying a large black briefcase, walking along the streets near the East River. He walked past the dimly lit bodegas and the graffiti-covered brick walls, as if he owned the night. This wasn't an isolated sighting. Over the next few weeks, he appeared again and again, always dressed in his long black coat, always carrying that large black briefcase. People described him as being over 6 feet tall, thin and handsome in a rugged kind of way. His face was pale and his eyes a startling blue. But what frightened people the most was his demeanor. He walked with a strange confidence, almost as if he were stalking his prey. Then more people started disappearing. Eddie C. Fields, Jr., a 23-year-old musician, vanished after leaving his girlfriend's house at 1 a.m. Cornelia C. Vanderval, a 21-year-old student at Brooklyn College, disappeared after attending a party in a dormitory. And in December 1976, Anzie Saunders, a 32-year-old nurse, disappeared after leaving work at Kings County Hospital. All of these cases seemed unrelated. The victims knew each other and worked in different parts of Brooklyn. And yet, witnesses kept reporting the same tall man with the briefcase. Could he have been responsible? At first, the police didn't think so. There was no physical evidence linking him to any of the crimes. And besides, there were hundreds of missing persons cases in New York every year. Most of them were runaways or people who had simply gotten mixed up in bad crowds. But something about this case disturbed Detective John Carroll. For one thing, all of the victims had been young, attractive people with no known enemies. And for another, all of them had vanished without a trace. That was rare. Normally, even in a missing persons case, the police could find some clue, some piece of evidence that gave them a lead. But in these cases, there was nothing, no sign that the victims had ever existed. Caro decided to investigate further. He started by visiting the places where the victims had last been seen. He canvassed the bars, clubs, and restaurants, showing the bouncers and bartenders a photo of the suspect. But none of them had seen him. So Carroll turned his attention to the witnesses. All of them had given similar descriptions of the suspect, but none of them could remember his name or where he lived. However, one witness claimed to have seen the man enter an apartment building in Brooklyn. It was a long shot, but Carroll decided to follow it up. He arrived at the building, a dilapidated 6-story structure with peeling paint and broken windows. The tenants were a mix of working-class families and drug dealers, none of whom had seen anything suspicious. As Carroll was about to give up hope, he noticed a torn piece of paper sticking out of a waste bin. He pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a receipt from a local grocery store, the butcher shop on the corner of 4th Avenue and 13th Street. Carroll raced to the shop. It was a small family-run business, with shelves stacked with cuts of meat and plastic bags filled with ice. The owner, a burly man with a thick mustache, greeted Carroll warmly. "Yeah, I remember him," the butcher said when Carroll showed him the photograph. "He came in here a few times, always asking for the biggest knife you can buy." The mystery deepened. Why did the man want a big knife? Was he planning something sinister? With a new lead in hand, Carroll continued his investigation. He traced the phone call to a payphone at the corner of 4th Avenue and 13th Street, the same street where the butcher shop was located. The phone was a standard rotary dial model bolted to a pole. The police checked the records and learned that the man had used it several times between October and December 1976. With a search warrant in hand, Carroll approached the payphone. He looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then he knelt down and started digging in the dirt beneath the receiver. He was searching for a small object known as a graver, a tool used by jewelers to engrave metal. The graver was a crucial piece of evidence, because it could link the suspect to a series of brutal murders that had rocked the city in the early 1970s. As Carroll dug deeper, his heart sank. The killer had used the payphone on December 1st, 2 days before Ann Saunders disappeared. Had he been using it to contact his victims before attacking them? Or was he calling for help after committing his crimes? Suddenly, his fingers brushed against something hard. He brushed away the dirt and picked up the object. It was a graver, exactly the kind the suspect had bought from the butcher shop. Carroll felt a surge of excitement. This was a major breakthrough. Not only did it connect the suspect to the murders, but it also gave them a potential motive. If the suspect was a jeweler, it made sense that he would target young, attractive women. They often wore expensive jewelry that would fetch a good price on the black market. But who was the man? The police had a description, but they didn't know his name or where he lived. Carroll decided to go back to the butcher shop. Maybe the owner recognized the man. When Carroll entered the shop, the air was heavy with the smell of blood and guts. The butcher was behind the counter, slicing up a carcass. Carroll approached him cautiously. "Do you remember this knife?" he asked, holding up the graver. The butcher's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. Carroll wasn't buying it. He could tell the butcher was lying. He arrested him and took him down to the station house. But the butcher wasn't talking. He invoked his right to remain silent and refused to answer any questions. Carroll wasn't giving up. He knew the butcher was hiding something. He just had to find a way to make him talk. Back at headquarters, Carroll pieced together the evidence. He discovered that the suspect had used a payphone to call a string of numbers. Most of them were unlisted, but one of them was connected to a flophouse on 4th Avenue. Carroll visited the flophouse, a rundown building with peeling paint and broken windows. He went inside and climbed the creaky stairs to the 2nd floor. He knocked on the door and waited. A moment later, the door opened and a man stepped out. It was the suspect.